There is something inside you that God is waiting to bury. Not your sin, not your weakness, not the thing you've already repented of 100 times. Something deeper. Something that looks good, something that feels right. Something that people around you have actually praised you for, and yet, God keeps putting His finger on it in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, in the silence after prayer. And every time He does, you pull back, because letting it go feels like losing yourself. But what if losing that thing is exactly how you find yourself? What if the version of you that God has been dreaming about since before the foundations of the earth, the you that carries real weight, real authority, real fruit, what if that version of you cannot show up until something in the current version of you is willing to go into the ground? Today, we are going to go somewhere that most Christian content will not take you. We are not talking about sin management today. We are not doing a 7-step program. We are not going to have a feel-good moment and go home unchanged. We are talking about death. Specifically, what must die in you before destiny lives? Stay with me, because by the end of this, something is going to shift in your spirit. Open your Bible or pull it up on your phone to the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse 24. Jesus is speaking, and He says something that should have stopped the entire crowd dead in their tracks. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." Now, read that again slowly. Unless it dies, it remains alone. Fruitful or alone. Those are the two options Jesus gives us. And the thing that determines which path you walk is not how many Bible verses you memorize. It is not how many church services you attend. It is not even how loudly you worship on a Sunday morning. It is whether or not you're willing to go into the ground. But here is what I want you to notice, and this is the part that most people skip over. Jesus did not say the grain of wheat is a bad grain. He did not say it was broken or worthless or corrupted. It is a grain of wheat. It has real potential, real authority locked inside it. But as long as it stays above ground, as long as it refuses the burial, it produces nothing. It just exists, intact, preserved, alone. And I want to ask you something, and I need you to sit with this question honestly. Is that where you are right now? Are you intact but alone? Are you preserved but fruitless? Do you have all the ingredients of a great destiny, but nothing is actually growing? Because if the answer is yes, then the conversation we are about to have is not a coincidence. Let me show you something else. Turn with me or just follow along to Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. Paul writes, "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." Now, this verse gets quoted at conferences and printed on mugs and posted on Instagram, but I want to slow down and ask, what exactly was it that was crucified? Paul does not say his humanity was crucified. He does not say his personality was crucified. He doesn't even say his gifts were crucified. What died in Paul was the version of Paul that was running the show without God. The self-sufficient Paul, the religiously impressive Paul, the Paul that persecuted the church and thought he was doing God a favor because of how certain he was about his own righteousness. That Paul had to die for the Apostle Paul to live. And right there is the heartbeat of what we are exploring today. Destiny does not come to add to the version of you that is already in charge. Destiny comes to replace it. I want to walk you through 5 specific things. 5 things that are common to believers who are called, gifted, and yet somehow stuck. These are not evil things. That is what makes them so dangerous. They are not obviously sinful. They look like strengths. They have served you, and they must still die. You are good at things, maybe very good. You figure things out, you find a way. People come to you for answers, and you almost always have one. You do not ask for help easily because honestly, you usually do not need to. You have built something, managed something, survived something that would have broken a lot of people. And all of that is real. I am not dismissing it. But somewhere along the line, your competence became your identity. And now, without even realizing it, you approach God the same way you approach everything else, as someone who has a plan. You pray, but you already have a strategy. You fast, but you already know the outcome you're working toward. You worship, but you are still the project manager of your own life. And God keeps getting you into situations where your competence is not enough, not to punish you, but to position you. Because the grace that is assigned to your destiny is too heavy for a person who trusts themselves. It will only flow through a person who has learned what it means to be desperate. Think about Moses. 40 years on the backside of a desert. This was a man who had been educated in the finest institution in the ancient world. He had military training, he had influence, he had tried to deliver his people through his own strength, and it ended in a dead Egyptian buried in the sand. God did not use Moses until Moses had been broken of Moses. The burning bush was not God's first conversation with Moses. It was God's conversation with a different Moses, a Moses who had sat in the wilderness long enough that the self-sufficiency had been baked out of him by the desert sun. What desert are you in right now? Because I promise you, it is not punishment, it is preparation. The death of self-sufficiency feels like failure. It feels like losing. It feels like watching people with less talent than you pass you by and not being able to explain why God hasn't moved yet. But something in you has to die before the miracle can live. There are things in your life that are not bad. Let me be very clear. Not sinful, not toxic, not even unhealthy. They are just familiar. The city you grew up in, the friendships that have defined your identity for a decade, the way you see yourself as someone's child, someone's sibling, someone who has always been in a certain kind of room, the version of your story you have been rehearsing since your 20s. And God is asking you to leave it. Not forever, not always, but at this specific moment in your walk, He is pointing to something familiar and saying, that has served its season. Now trust me into the next one. And the reason this is so hard is not because the familiar is bad. It is because it is safe. And safety, when it becomes your priority above obedience, becomes a cage with a comfortable interior. Abraham is the father of faith, not because he was fearless. He is the father of faith because he moved when he did not know where he was going. Hebrews 11:8 says it plainly. He went out not knowing where he was going. He had no GPS, no plan B, no guarantee. He just had a voice, and he trusted that the voice was enough. What is the familiar thing in your life that has quietly become a substitute for faith? What are you protecting so carefully that God cannot get you to let go of it? The death of the familiar is not the death of your history. God does not erase where you came from. He just refuses to let your past dictate your future. Something has to die.
This might be the most painful one on this list, because it is not just about leaving a place or surrendering a habit. This is about the you that people have labeled, celebrated, defined, and depended on, and the terrifying experience of letting God change you in ways that confuse the people who thought they knew you. Some of you are trapped in a version of yourself that you outgrew 3 years ago, but you keep performing it because the people around you are comfortable with it, and disappointing people feels like a kind of death. So you keep shrinking, you keep dimming, you keep showing up as the old you because the new you hasn't been validated yet. But here is what I know about God. He will sometimes do a work in you that your community cannot understand yet. He will take you through a transformation that looks, from the outside, like instability, like pride, like you've changed. And people will say that like it's an accusation, but you have changed. And that is not a betrayal of where you came from. That is the evidence that God is alive inside you. Think about the disciples after the resurrection. Something died in the room on the night of Pentecost. Something timid, something hidden, something waiting for someone else to lead. And what rose up in its place was bold, unrecognizable. The same men who hid behind locked doors were now turning cities upside down. The people who had known them before probably whispered, "Something is different about them." Yes, something died. And then something greater lived. Let the version of you that people have been comfortable with go into the ground. Because what God is raising up cannot fit inside the container of who you used to be. You had a plan. You know you did. Maybe you even prayed over it, wrote it in a journal, believed God for it. By this age, this would be done. By this season, that would be established. You had a picture in your mind of what your life was supposed to look like at this point. And it doesn't look like that. And somewhere between the promise and the present moment, you have been carrying a weight that has a very specific name: disappointment. Not the loud kind of disappointment that makes you throw things, the quiet kind. The kind that shows up in the way you scroll past other people's announcements. The kind that makes you nod and say God is good on Sunday while something aches privately on Monday. And I need to say something to you with all the compassion I have. A timeline that is not God's must die because it is slowly killing your faith. Joseph did not get from the pit to the palace in 6 months. Between the dream God gave him as a teenager and the throne he eventually stood on, there were years of slavery, years of prison, and years of being forgotten by the very people he helped. And the timeline Joseph had imagined after that first dream, none of it matched what actually happened. But the destination matched perfectly. God is not behind. He is not confused. He is not scrambling to catch up to your expectations. He is doing in you, right now, in this season that feels like delay, something that cannot be done in the version of you that arrives on time. The grief of releasing your timeline is real. Grieve it. Cry if you need to. But then open your hands. Because what God has planned does not fit in the container of what you planned. And it is going to require a you who has stopped clinging to the calendar. This last one is the most sophisticated deception on the list. And I say sophisticated because it sounds so reasonable. It sounds so responsible. It sounds sometimes like it is protecting you. But it is not wisdom. It is fear wearing wisdom's clothing. You know what I mean. I just want to be sure before I step out. I'm waiting for more confirmation. I just need a little more time to prepare. I want to be responsible about this. And every one of those statements can be genuinely wise in the right context. Discernment is real. Preparation has its place. Confirmation matters. But for some of you, and you know who you are, those phrases have become a permanent address. You are not waiting for confirmation. You have had the confirmation. You are not preparing. You have been prepared. You are not being wise. You are afraid. And the fear is telling you that if you move and fail, it will be over, that the risk is too great, that you have too much to lose, that you should wait just a little longer, just until the conditions are more certain.
But faith, by its very definition, moves in uncertainty. Hebrews 11 does not say by faith they moved when all the conditions were perfect. It says they moved, period. And the evidence of the invisible became visible after they went. The Jordan River did not part and then the priests walked through. The priests stepped into the water, and the moment their feet touched the flood, something moved. Your fear is not protecting your destiny, it is postponing it. Something must die. The fear, the overcaution, the false security of always waiting, it has to go into the ground. And on the other side of that death, there is a life waiting for you that you cannot currently imagine from where you are standing. I want to be honest with you for a moment. Everything I have said today, I have not just studied it, I have lived it. There was a season in my life where I held so tightly to my own plan, my own image, my own sense of what God was supposed to be doing, that I almost missed the thing God was actually building. I looked like I was in faith. I was quoting the right scriptures. I was showing up to the right places. But I was terrified. I was self-protecting. I was performing a version of myself that had long since expired, because the new version felt too vulnerable, too uncertain, too exposed. And God, in His mercy, did not leave me there. He did not shout at me. He did not send a crisis, though sometimes He uses those too. He just kept showing up in the quiet moments, kept putting His finger on the same things, kept asking the same question underneath every prayer I prayed. Are you ready to let that go? And the day I stopped negotiating, the day I stopped trying to figure out how to keep the old thing while also receiving the new thing, something shifted. Not immediately, not dramatically, not in a way that would make a highlight reel, but something shifted. And standing on this side of that surrender, I want to tell you with everything in me that what is waiting on the other side of your death is worth it. God is not asking you to lose yourself. He is asking you to lose the version of yourself that was never going to get you to where He is taking you. I want to give you a moment. Right now, wherever you are watching this, whether you are in your car, in your bedroom, at your kitchen table, whether it is the middle of the night or the early morning, I want you to do something. I want you to close your eyes for just 30 seconds and ask God one question. Not a big prayer, not a long intercession, just one question. Lord, what in me needs to die? And then be still enough to hear the answer, because He will answer. Not always with a voice, sometimes with a feeling, a nudge, a memory, a name, a habit, a relationship, a fear, a plan. Whatever surfaces in that silence, that is the conversation. That is the thing. And after you have sat in that moment, I want you to do something even harder. I want you to say yes. Not to dying really, but to living. To the life that is buried on the other side of your surrender, to the destiny that has been waiting, not for the right moment, but for you that is willing to go into the ground. John 12:24. Unless the grain goes into the ground, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Let it die, so the fruit can live. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this message did something in you, if it stirred something, confirmed something, or challenged something, do not let that feeling sit quietly. Act on it, write it down, pray into it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're watching this and you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, if the idea of a God who would plant something in you before you were born and then walk with you through the dying seasons just to bring it to life is something you have never said yes to, today is a good day to start that conversation. Because the whole story of the gospel is this: God was so committed to your life that He sent His Son into the ground, into death, so that something could rise. Something always rises. That is the promise. That is the pattern. And that is the invitation. If you found this video meaningful, please share it. Not for the numbers, but because someone in your life might be in a dying season right now, and they need to know that God is in it. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper together. And leave a comment below. Tell me, what did God put His finger on today? What came up in that moment of silence? I read every single one. Until next time, go in peace, walk in faith, and let whatever needs to die go. God is not finished with you. He is just getting started.